I am so ridiculously excited about this video. I just don't even know what to say. If this is not a nerd freak out, I can tell you what one is. Today I am going to talk about idiomatic expressions. No, really, I am. So if you started learning a new language, and especially if you started trying to speak with a native speaker, you're going to notice that there are going to be some things that don't translate no matter how hard you try. Those are referred to as idiomatic expressions. When I was in Spanish class in high school and in college, the teacher always referred to idiomatic expressions as the sum does not equal its parts, which made no sense to me whatsoever. And then he said, well, you know what? It's not really completely translatable. Which, for someone who wants to work as a translator, that sounded a little terrifying. But basically what an idiomatic expression is, it's just a saying, could be a proverb or an expression that a particular language has that grew up with the language. It entered maybe through a work of fiction or as a political saying. And in English, idiomatic expressions are, for example, she hit the roof. 2 peas in a pod. Stuck between a rock and a hard place. So imagine you were trying to translate that into French, for example. Oh, that's going to be incredibly hard. But fear not, you do actually have some resources for working with them. Now, I mentioned earlier that I love going to Goodwill. And actually, my local Goodwill store just pretty much knows me once I come through the door that I'm going to head over to the language area. And I was very lucky that I was able to find 2 books that deal just exclusively with idiomatic expressions. The first one is in Spanish. It's called The Red Hot Book of Spanish Slang and Idioms and Expressions to Spice Up Your Spanish. Yeah, the title's kind of dirty sounding and, just a little illicit, but actually this is a wonderful resource. And if you're looking in Barnes & Noble, look for something that probably says Dirty Spanish or Street Spanish or all the Spanish you really need to know or something like that, because it's going to give you the words in the language that you don't hear in your textbook. And if you're working with a teacher, more than likely those are not the words that you're going to hear every single week. So I'm going to read to you a few examples to give you an idea of how sometimes these expressions really don't translate at all. We're going to start with the Spanish ones. The first one, believe it or not, does appear in English, between a rock and a hard place. In Spanish, the closest is entre la espada y la pared, between the sword and the wall. Say it again. Entre la espada y la pared, between the sword and the wall. The second one, like 2 peas in a pod. In Spanish, the closest is como 2 gotas y agua, like 2 drops of water. Which, to be honest, I think actually sounds better. And another one, on the tip of the tongue. And in Spanish, the closest is a la flor de labio, at the flower of the lips. Again, I have to give it to Spanish because this is much more poetic than English. And the final one in Spanish, to stake one's life on someone. Mete las manos al fuego por alguien. To put one's hand in the fire for someone. So in addition to the fact that the Spanish is obviously much more poetic than English, as you can see, there are things that are similar, but not exact. So, for example, if you were writing a blog post and you wanted to just use some slang or some kind of turn of phrase that's not just correct Spanish, you can get into trouble. French, also known as my personal nemesis, has its own. At Goodwill, I also picked up les bons mots, also known as the good parts. See, notice that there's a theme going on. Dirty French, all the French you need to know. Yeah, they reel you in with all these promises, and the next thing you know, you're getting slapped with grammar. Sorry. I'm going to start with the first one in French. The expression in English, "that's the last straw," in French is known as "c'est la fin du tout." Literally means that's the end of it all. The second phrase in French I'd like to share with you is one I hope that you personally will not use very often, but hey, who am I to judge? In English, the term skip town in French is known as faire un tour à la lune, which is translated literally as to flee one's creditors, or which translates into to flee one's creditors, or the literal translation in French is to make a hole in the moon. One more in French. The English phrase, "you can only stand so much," in French is known as "la faim chasse le devoir," which literally in French means hunger will drive even a wolf out of the woods. La faim chasse le devoir. So, if there's something in your language that's giving you fits, doesn't seem that's exactly what you thought it was, if you're getting some really weird looks from native speakers, including your editor or your client, my suggestion is to pick up a book of idiomatic expressions because the last thing you want to do is embarrass yourself by trying to go literal when everyone else wants to speak figuratively. Well, we probably learned a little now, and if you'd like to learn some more, just hit that big red subscribe button and you'll be subscribed to the channel. You can also head over to my blog, www.shorttranslation.com. And if you'll subscribe to our newsletter, you'll also get a free copy of my report, The 13 Most Common Mistakes New Freelancers Make. I'll also send you exclusive content, including podcasts, posts, and other goodies. Thanks a lot, and I will see you in the next video.